Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. And today we have with us Jeremy Creighton, who is the co-founder of Passport Brand Design. Jeremy, welcome to the program.
Hi, Mike. Thanks.
Hey, so I'm excited to chat with you about branding and what you do for the companies that you work for and what sets you apart. But first, give us a little bit of background on yourself. I know that it's always interesting to hear the entrepreneurial journey and what led you to what you're currently doing.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I grew up in Australia, fascinated about art and design from an early age, really got into sculpture and painting and pottery and all that sort of stuff. And then I got into design and layout, and then I went to college for graphic design, or in that day it was called graphic communications. And then I kind of traveled around a bit like all Aussies do, and then got my first job at a brand identity company, and I just fell in love with logos and positioning work and that sort of layout world. And then that took me to a company in Melbourne, and then I got an offer to go to New York, and so I jumped on it and ended up in New York working for a packaging design company that was just really, once again, took the identity world. Then I went into packaging world, and then after that I ended up starting my own company based on what I'd learned from New York, and then that was 20 years ago. So now we're an agency based in. We've got still a team in Australia. We've got a team in New York and a team here in California, and we work with huge brands doing CPG. That's our core focus.
Yeah. So consumer packaged goods.
Yes, correct.
Neat. You said something there that I want to dive into, where you said it used to be called graphic communication, but now it's kind of known as graphic design. I don't expect you to know when that transition happened, but it really popped into my mind when you said it that I almost feel like that is a incorrect shift. We should still be calling it graphic communication, because in reality, if you focus on the word design, then the branding is focused too much on the look and feel of the design as opposed to the message that it communicates.
I can't agree.
I mean, we can't change the whole industry, but it's kind of like a head scratcher there.
Yeah, and I think what makes us different is we've always looked at it as a communication project. So, messaging, tone of voice, personality, a unique perspective is all packaged together with the design elements and the look and feel and the symbolic identity. So, yeah, your brand is much bigger than design, and I think we've done a good job of trying to fight for the idea rather than the look and feel, and that follows. And it's important, of course. But yeah, what's the idea? What's the big idea that holds everything together?
And really, my opinion is, if you asked that question to a client and maybe it's the boardroom with 2 or 3 people in it, you're going to get, a whole litany of answers, and it's going to be long-winded, and you're going to pare it down, and you still just need to get it to, what's the crux of the matter? What's the real story and mission that we can clearly communicate? Because I would venture to say that you work with some brands that when you first start working with them, there is no rhyme or reason to their messaging. And then even when you work with them, they fight you on, but we need to include this, and you maybe you're trying to explain to them, but it's really confusing, and it's talking about 2 different things. So talk a little bit about how you would start working with someone to help them really clarify that down.
Yeah, so I think about 10 years ago, companies used to talk about their mission, vision, and that was pretty much how we used to start our workshops. And we turned our workshops into purpose workshops, and we worked out that purpose was the center line between what the company does really well and what the consumer need is. And we worked out that it was much stronger because, as you know, the internet and all the ability for consumers to respond and be part of the conversation, consumers are now the biggest part of the brand. Yeah. The consumer is driving the brand now. And so, the purpose workshops are all about like understanding the consumer really at a deep level of kind of what are their human needs, what are they doing in their life, what actions are they taking, what are they trying to achieve, and then how does the brand help them progress. And so the purpose workshop really is about kind of the first thing we do when we start a project is like, do we really know who we're connecting to, and do we know what's driving them and what they're trying to achieve. So that's the starting point.
Yeah, it really is. And I love on your website how you've got these specific categories: think, create, activate, because too many times it's kind of like the old, ready, aim, fire. It's really, people like to try to go ready, fire, 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 aim, and they just want to get out there. So I really think that, people tend to jump right to activate. Let's get those campaigns going. But you need to think first, you need to plan, and you need to understand who that target audience is and what drives them, and, what are their, actual drivers, what are their emotional drivers, and what are the things that, they want to understand logically and emotionally before making a buying decision. So what are some thoughts that way, as far as determining what they are?
Yeah, well, I guess, the entrepreneur needs to get stuff done, and that's the problem with the startup culture at the moment. They're raising money, they're getting funds, and then they're like, quick, we've got to prove something out. And that pressure does put things upside down a little bit because they're trying to do tactics before they're doing the thinking. So that's definitely the challenge for the startup world. Of course, the bigger brands like, we work with Coca-Cola and Kraft and Nestle and all sorts of big corporations, and they've been trained a bit better to kind of think about, okay, what is the big idea? What's the big goal here? How do we kind of make sure we've done some time in strategy to get it right before we start spending on the activation? And activation is expensive, so getting it right a big mistake,
Yeah, that's, I like, quotes and sayings, and it reminds me of what you just said there. It makes me think of measure twice, cut once, right? So activating is expensive. So you don't just want to go out there and jump in and try this or throw it up against the wall, because you're spending money and you're actually, maybe spending attention from your target audience, because if you try something and it did not work and then you try to tweak it, maybe they're going to not pay as much of attention as if it was dialed in right the first time.
Yeah. And I know strategy is expensive as well, and I know that it takes a little bit of time, but once you've got your purpose, once you really know what your purpose is, why the brand wakes up and go and achieve, is suddenly content and everything starts to flow together. And it doesn't really matter if you're activating in a million different channels or different or zones. You still know the common thread that holds everything together, and that becomes the thing that you end up holding on to. And then you can really see, okay, you can build a tribe around a common purpose,
Yeah, you say in your process on your website, step 2 is to create an ownable identity through character. So what is an ownable identity, and how do you create one? And of course, in 2 minutes or less, because we don't have, 2 weeks to, I'm sure you could really go deep on that one. But I mean, when you do have this ownable identity, is it something where you literally would build it out so far that you might even need to look at trademarking it? It's that official?
Yeah, well, Mike, we worked with Coke for a long time, and we realized Coke would buy a product and say, hey, we want to build it into our portfolio, let's reposition it. Yeah. And we really realized that, functional benefits were really hard to own. A drink's a drink, a juice is a juice, a soda is a soda. Like it's getting harder because production's getting faster and easier and quick. It's really hard to own anything functional Unless you're doing something really quite unique in a unique space. But 99% of brands that we work with are really competition can really claim similar RTBs, right? So we ended up using Carl Jung's theory of archetypes, and we went, hey, the thing that really makes people different is their character, the way they come to life, right? And so our branding process is using archetypes and kind of saying, well, use your personality as your key differentiator, and bring your brand to life, because if you can turn a brand into a person, it's got a much better chance to make relationships. And products can't make relationships. They're too functional thing, but personalities have a kind of attitude and have a way of showing up and have a kind of a point of view on the world. So we realized the strongest way to build your identity system is through your character. And that, if you can work that out, you can start to work out color systems, you can layouts, you can start to work out tone of voice. All that stuff starts to come pretty quick.
And I would think that depending on the actual brand and the depth and breadth of their product line or what they're wanting to accomplish, you could do this exercise and create that, ownable identity, and then go, you know what, we need to now do the same thing for this other product. And the reason I bring that up is that it reminds me of, what's Nike's most popular shoe ever? Well, it's the Air Jordans. That's a person. That's a human. That's a identity. But yet they don't only have Air Jordans. They have many, many, many other athletic type shoes that are identified to players. So I think that you can get too wide too fast depending on your brand, but you don't need to think, okay, I did this once, now what?
Yeah. And I think why I love archetypes so much is, if you meet someone, you start to understand them from a personality point of view, and it's the same as brands. Now, if brands keep changing their personality, then they start to be schizophrenic, and you can't build trust through, like, if I turn up one day and I'm a nice guy and I turn up another day and I'm an angry guy and I'm a funny guy, if I keep changing my personality, you're going to go, I can't trust this guy. He's all over the shop, right? Brands are the same. Brands are trying to do too many different tricks, and they haven't really worked out, okay, if they can pull it down into their core archetype, then they behave the same way all the time. And even if they bring 10 new products to life, they're bringing it to life in their own way. And that's why personality branding's quite easy, because you can tap into the personality or the founder. But when brands start to become bigger than that person and it turns into a corporation, they lose that perspective of what's our core essence, what's our core personality, So I think it's a great, it's fun to do with friends as well. It's just trying to work out, who are your mates,
Yeah, that's a good point. And when you work with brands, what would be something that someone like a brand manager might be experiencing or noticing? What can they notice in their organization right now that might make them think, Jeremy might be able to help polish up what we're doing here?
Yeah, I think if you're questioning why we're doing things, that's the biggest, that's your first kind of, identifier that you don't know why. Things should really make logical sense to why a brand does stuff, and how a brand pops up, or how a brand approaches social or digital, or how a brand launches a new product. It should feel really instinctually right. And if that challenge feels challenging, if you kind of go, why are we doing this? Then you haven't really identified that true character, because if you know that person, you'll know how they throw a party. You kind of could expect what sort of car they'll drive. It all makes sense. But brands seem to want to do things because they've got targets to meet. So they're trying to do a million things, and they have to. But if it doesn't make sense in why or how they're doing it, that's kind of like, okay, we need to go back to strategy here.
Now, once you get that dialed in, do you find or do you recommend that you actually name that identity that for that avatar? Like for instance, have you heard of John Lee Dumas, JLD with EO Fire?
No.
So he's a podcaster, and he wrote a book called The Common Path to Uncommon Success. And he just talks about, finding your target market and naming it. And he goes, my avatar is Jimmy, and Jimmy is 42 years old. He's a male, and he starts rattling off all these, demographics and psychographics. And I've even heard of some companies that they have their target audience so dialed in and named, and they pick a, stock photo of somebody, male or female, that they say, here's our avatar. And when they do webinars, they, paste it up in the monitor behind them so that as you're looking at the webcam, you're speaking to your avatar. How dialed in do you think that a brand could get to make sure that they're keeping those communications and messaging really, really tightly designed for that target audience?
Yeah, look, I like the process. We've used it before. The problem with Jimmy is, do we know why Jimmy's changing over time? And I think that's the danger here of building, personas or avatars or whatever you want to call it in your audience. Do we know where they're moving to? And what's our way of doing that? Do we have an insights that we run every year? Do we use Kantar research? Like, what are we using to know what? Because it's not really who Jimmy is, his age and demographics. We don't focus on demographics at all. It's now the psychographic of what everyone is trying to become someone else in some way. They're trying to evolve some way. And if you can tap into more like what Jimmy's wanting to become versus who Jimmy is and where Jimmy is today. Yeah. I'm only using Jimmy because now I'm stuck on Jimmy.
Yeah, right.
But I'm using it as an analogy. But just be careful you don't set your audience. The biggest problem brands have is they set an audience and it's stuck, and then 10 years time they go, oh my God, we're not relevant anymore because Jimmy changed, but they didn't. And personas are great. I mean, I've got brands that I'm working with that have got 12 personas. I've got some that have got 6. So you don't need one, because the shopper's different and the channels are different. So you really need to make sure that one works for you. And I know there's a trend at the moment of these single product brands developing, but consumers are really quite complex doing personas right. And making sure we know where, that's why psychology is better, because you're looking at the need of that person rather than who that person is. Because lots of people aren't happy with where they are. And if the brand can help them get to where they want to get to, then that brand will stay really kind of part of their relationship.
Yeah, I mean, that's just huge points. Is you don't just check the box and go, I did it, and here's my updated branding and brand messaging, and I'm done forever. No, it changes. It maybe the target audience changes, maybe their aspirations change, maybe the technology changes, and you need to deliver it in a different way. So I think that those are just such great points. So Jeremy, thank you for coming on. I would like to just wrap up with what's the best way that someone could reach out and connect with you.
Yeah, I mean, like we are, we've got the website, obviously. You can shoot us an email. We'd love to get in touch with people. We love what we do. We've got a great team of about 50 people. Half of those are strategy. So it's really hard to find good thinkers, that want to work on this stuff. And we've got a team. We use freelancers all over the world. We try to be as diverse as we can. But yeah, we've got an info address on the website. Would love to speak to anyone who's got any brand challenges for sure. But it's been great, Mike. Thanks for connecting with me today.
You are welcome, Jeremy. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and thanks again for your time.
You too, mate. Bye.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.